All right. Hey, guys and gals of AP. I am here today to record this little video about AP exam writing, as that's what we're going to be concentrating on. So I'm going to hopefully clear up some misconceptions that we might have in this writing. I know that previously I had told you that they could pick, like 3 of the writings were you could pick from, or they could pick from a different type of writing, but you actually have 4 different types of writing. Okay, so it's not either or, you've got 4 types. Okay, so let's kind of go over the exam review or overview of it, so to speak, and I will show you how the writing is broken up, and then hopefully tomorrow or maybe later on this afternoon we can actually write. Okay, do some writing. This test that's coming up at your midterm, you will have some writing on it as well. Okay, so the exam is 3 hours long. Okay, it includes 55 multiple choice questions and 4 free response questions. So that hasn't changed. So you have 55 multiple choice, and then you have 4 free response questions. Okay, one of them being an argumentative essay. Okay, so if you look here, the first part, 50% of your exam, 80 minutes instead of 55. So they've given you like a minute and 45 seconds per. So it's actually a little bit more time than what I give you on my tests. Okay, so that's to your advantage. Oops, sorry. Okay. All right, so if you look here, 3 exam, 55, 80 minutes. Now, the free response questions, you get 100 minutes, 20 minutes per. All right, so that means like on your midterm, you're probably only going to have 1. I thought maybe we'd do 2, but I'm not going to split it up like that. Okay, so you have a concept application, that's question 1, that's worth 3 points, and we'll talk about what that means here in just a minute. Then you have quantitative analysis, which is 4 points. That would be like looking at the graphs and stuff like we just did and talking about voting, or what is it, presidential, like party, or like the party graphs that we've looked at. Okay, so those are quantitative analysis. That's 4 points. So if you have a concept, you have quantitative analysis, and then you have Supreme Court case analysis. And these are going to kind of be similar to what they do in APUS, in that you take a court case that you know, and then they will give you a reading from another case that you may not know, and you have to use those cases. You have to kind of compare and contrast those cases. Okay, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here in just a second. All right, and that one's 20 minutes, and then you get 40 minutes to write your argumentative essay, which is 6 points. Okay, so your essay is 6, your SCOTUS comparison is 4, then you have quantitative analysis, which is 4, and then concept application, which is 3. Okay, now the big ideas that the exam looks at, I gave you big ideas when we started talking about political participation again. So you have constitutionalism. So that would be like the early forms, like federalism, and how the Declaration was, and the articles and that kind of thing, how the Constitution came about, everything behind it. All right, then you have liberty and order, which we haven't gotten there yet, but that's part of the court systems and civic, like civil liberties and that kind of thing. The big idea number 3 is civic participation and representative democracy. So that's kind of where we are right now. So then big idea 4 is like competing policy making interests. We're kind of talking about that a little bit because we're talking about interest groups and things like that. And then we're going to talk about how the branches interact with each other in making their things known. okay, or making their laws and making what they do, you know, and carrying out their duties. And then you've got methods of political analysis. That's another big idea, kind of like what we did with the demographic groups and that kind of thing. But there's going to be some more of that later on. All right. If you look here, this is the exam weight, Foundations of American Democracy, interactions among the branches. That is the big kahuna here. That's where most of the test questions come from in your AP exam. And then most of it, other ones come from what we're talking about now, like political participation. Okay. All right. So, and then you've got these other ones here, like foundations is some, civil liberties, civil rights is another, you know, and then political ideology and belief, 10 to 15% of the questions. And so, and they usually divide them up. And what I can tell, I could tell that they still do. They still divide them into sections, and you'll see that when you take your mock exam sometime in January, February. Okay. All right. These are just concepts. You can look at those if you want. Concept application talks about in a multiple choice questions, like we'll need to describe, explain, and compare political principles, institutions, processes, policies, behaviors. All of that talks about, you know, concepts. So they might talk about like, why is people over 60 a big demographic group for voting? That's a concept. All right. How does it compare to other groups? Okay, that would be an analysis type question. And you're, all right, so there, you can look at those. Quantitative analysis, like 5 sets of these, 2 to 3 questions per set. They have like line graphs, charts, tables, maps, infographics. Okay, those are quantitative like questions for the multiple choice section. Text-based analysis, 2 to 3, 4 questions per set. There's 2 sets of those. The foundational documents, that's one way that they look at those. The other set includes a stimulus or a primary or secondary text-based source. So you might look at the Constitution and answer questions, or you would compare contrast like Brutus 1 and Federalist, 10? Okay, so that's why we paid a lot of attention to that. Most of you, I think all of you guys know how to do that, so you're good. The visual source analysis might have political cartoons. It says there's 3 sets, 2 questions per set. Each set includes 1 visual stimulus, including a map, image, cartoon, and or infographic. They're really big on like voting data. That's kind of some of the things that I've seen, like different elections data or different countries versus the United States. That's why I included those in some of your PowerPoints and stuff like that. And then there's some that are just thrown in. It says approximately 30 or so questions that are just individual choice questions that they don't have any kind of stimulus, or, you know, sometimes they put like where it says visual source, they might give you a visual or a reading in your questions, and you have to, the STEM, and then you have to answer like 3 or 4 questions with that. Okay, that's what they're talking about as sets. Then there's individual choice questions that it might be anything from different types of policy all the way to, you know, looking at graphs. I mean, it could be anything, any of it. Okay. Now, what I wanted to concentrate on was the free response questions and the argumentative essay. They still count that as part of your free response questions. Now, remember that first free response question presents you with a scenario. All right, so let's look at this. I'll read it. Presents students with an authentic scenario. This question assesses student ability to describe and explain the effects of a political institution a behavior, or a process. So it's very easy. It's concepts. Okay. Additionally, this question assesses student ability to transfer understanding of course concepts and apply them in a new situation or scenario. It may give you, like, Congress passed a stimulus bill for COVID-19 and you have to go through the process. Okay, so that's a concept question. Okay. Number 2 says quantitative analysis. All right. So you're going to be presented with a quantitative data in the form of a table, graph, map, or infographic. That's why I try to provide them on. I've provided them on both tests, I think, or at least I know that I did the reading. I think I may have to start providing some more of that. Okay. So this concept question is 3 points. The free response, number 2, the quantitative analysis, that's 4 points. Okay. The question assesses students' ability to perform. So you have to show that you know it. You have to perform it. Okay. You have to describe the data presented. You need to look for patterns, trends, similarities, or differences in the data. They might ask you to predict. Okay, so that's drawing a conclusion based on the data. All right, or you might have to explain how the data demonstrates a political principle, institution, process, policy, or behavior. Okay, so you might have to analyze the data as in, like, what is it talking about, and then explain it, like how it demonstrates something. All right, so it's quantitative analysis. So you're looking at the data. A lot of times, and again, this type of writing might have more than one section to it. It might have like an ABC part to it. All right, so you got to be able to explain that. Now, this one's some of you are going to have some trouble with this. All it is, it's memorization, a lot of it. Let me talk about it. It says SCOTUS comparison, so it's Supreme Court cases. Okay, so when I say you need to know a Supreme Court case, we're getting ready to do like 3 or 4 acts and cases and stuff for campaign finance. Make sure you know those. They always show up somewhere, either as a multiple choice question or as proof on something in the free response question section. So they're always on there. Okay. All right. So SCOTUS comparison, it says present students with a description of a non-required Supreme Court case and its holding. So it'll give you a case. You got to read it. All right. And then you need to think about the cases that we have been required to read. Okay. So it'll give you a case that we haven't read. All right. And you're going to have to do this. You're going to have to take a case and read that. And then you're going to have to think about cases that we have read. All right, so you're going to identify a similarity or difference between the non-required Supreme Court case and a specified Supreme Court case required in the course. So say if we, I don't know, freedom of speech case. Oh God, I went blank. Tinker versus Des Moines. All right, that's a Supreme Court case that talks about you can wear the armband as a sign of protest as long as it's not disturbing anybody. And they may give you a case that might be similar to that. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. So you're going to have to read that case and look at its merit and like what's going on in it and what did they decide and what was their reasoning, and compare it to, say, Tinker versus Des Moines. Okay. All right. It says describe the details, reasoning, or holding that the required Supreme Court case specified in the question. And then explain a similarity or difference in the reasoning or holding in the two Supreme Court cases. So, like I said, it gives you a case that we've read, which we'll be reading Tinker. You have to know that one. And it'll give you a case that might be similar in its finding, and you have to compare and contrast them. Okay? All right. So then you're comparing and contrasting them. So explain a similarity or difference in the reasoning or holding of the two Supreme Court cases. And then explain how the reasoning or holding in the non-required case demonstrates a political principle, institution, process, policy, or behavior. So then you're going to take, after you've kind of compared, okay, say Tinker's decided this and this case decided this, they're similar because then you got to demonstrate how this case demonstrates First Amendment. Okay, so this one's hard. So you're going to have to memorize court cases and their holding and their reasoning, like why they decided a certain way. It's hard. And I would say start making flashcards because that's the only way that you can kind of memorize them. And you guys are going to do a game with them, but just know that you need to know. I know there's going to be 20, 25 court cases that you're going to have to know. And then I also have a list of 100 cases that could be on there. I'm not going to make you know all those, but just kind of know that there's several. All right. And then the last one, it says free response question, argumentative essay. Assesses the student's ability to do the following. We kind of do this with our blog. That's why I was trying to keep you like on the topic and what you know about the topic, like the COVID one, the second or third one we did. Some people thought I was trying to push a certain way. No, I wanted you to look at presidential powers, what they could do and not do. All right. Anyway, so let's look what you have to do. Articulate a defensible claim or thesis that responds to the question and establishes a line of reasoning. All right, so you have to develop a thesis, provide evidence from the foundational documents listed. So it's kind of like a DBQ. Provide evidence from a second foundational document or knowledge of course concepts. All right. Use reasoning to explain why the evidence supports the claim. So you've got to come up with two things of evidence and then respond to an opposing or alternative perspective using refutation, concession, or rebuttal. So you got to come up with a thesis, provide two things of evidence from the documents that are provided. This is why you get 40 minutes for this question. And that's why it's worth 6 points. All right. And then you have to explain why how this evidence or why the evidence supports your claim, and then respond saying, you always respond with an alternative perspective, like while this case says this, and it does have merit because it does not apply to what is being spoken here because of whatever. Okay, so you have to, it makes your argument stronger if you can look at the other side and use it for your advantage. So if you, like those of you that were in Y Club and have done the Supreme Court, that's what they're kind of looking for. Okay. All right, so, all right. Just really quick here. The following task verbs are commonly used in the free response questions. You've got compare, define, describe, develop an argument, draw a conclusion, explain, or identify, and you guys can look and see what those are. All right. Here are some sample open response questions. You've kind of seen these, like the Federalist 10, Brutus 1. Which of the following is an accurate comparison? You might have a chart here, and it says relationship between views All right, it says relationship between views on civil liberties and gun ownership. And so you've got to be able to read this. Excerpts, okay. This is another data that you're going to have to look at, like qualitative analysis. Now, here's a sample free response question. This is a question 1. All right, so what was question 1? Oops, let's go back up down here. All right, so go back up and look at what we were talking about as far as like, it's a concept application is question 1. All right, so if you look at that sample question, so it's a concept, so it's worth 3 points. You read this. After reading the scenario, respond to A, B, and C below. Describe the action being taken by the National Association of Home Builders in the scenario. Explain how the action described in Part A affects policy making in Congress. So how is this affecting things that are going on in a bigger picture? And then explain how this difference will likely affect the conservationist groups. So it's taken another group that might be affected by laws that are being made, and you have to explain how. All right, that's pretty easy. That's 3 points. All right, qualitative analysis, free response question. And this is something you have to know too, like where it says use the graphic to answer the question. All right, you'll have to know like the type of spending. Okay, so that's going to be something that we'll look at when we get to policy. But use the information. It says identify the most common level of education spending by states in the Southeast. So how much do they spend on education per pupil? $8,000 to $10,000 per pupil. All right, describe a similarity or a difference in public education spending by state or region as illustrated by the information graphic. Is there any place else that has a similar spending? How do you know? Draw a conclusion about the similarity or difference. So you're actually just analyzing what's going on here. That's pretty easy, but it's worth 4 points. You write very precisely, and you divide them up accordingly. So if you're talking about group A, you label your parts. Label your parts. Label your parts. All right. A SCOTUS comparison. Here we go. It says in 35, Congress passed the National Labor Relations Act, which among other things guaranteed workers the right to join a labor union and collectively bargain with employers. It also established the National Labor Relations Board, an independent agency responsible for enforcing this law. The Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation fired 10 workers attempting to unionize its plant located in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. When the National Labor Relations Board determined this to be in violation of the recently passed NLRA, the company sued, claiming that the labor relations had only an indirect effect on the commerce, and thus Congress did not have the constitutional power to regulate it. All right. In the Supreme Court case, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the National Labor Relations Board, holding that the Jones and Laughlin Corporation conducted interstate commerce and relations after that commerce. All right, so you're going to identify the constitutional clause that is common in both U.S. versus Lopez. That's a case that you're going to have to memorize. It's been in all of the ones that I can tell. And this court case in 1937. So you've got a 1995 court case, and you're looking at the clauses that were both in common in both those court cases. Explain how the facts in U.S. versus Lopez led to a different holding than in this court case. And explain how the holding in the National Labor Relations Board versus Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation affected the balance of power between the states and the national government. So you're looking at case and how it's kind of changed. Okay. This is going to be hard. All right. But we'll get through it together. All right. You've got to know the court cases. And I think I need to do a better job in making sure that you guys look at those. Okay. So as you can kind of see, they're going to give you one case. You have to know the other case. All right. Here's an argumentative essay. And so this is why we had these foundational documents. This is a foundational piece. Develop an argument that explains which of the three models of representative democracy best achieves the founders' intent for American democracy in terms of ensuring a stable government run by the people. So you're going to have to know what a participatory government is, a pluralist or elite theory. All right. And use at least one piece of evidence from one of the following foundational documents to show this. In your response, you should do the following. Respond to the prompt with a defensible claim. Support the claim with at least two pieces of evidence. All right. One piece of evidence must come from the foundational document. A second piece of evidence can come from another foundational document, from any other foundational document not used as your first piece of evidence, or from your knowledge of course concept. All right. Use reasoning to explain why your evidence supports your claim or thesis. And then respond to an opposing or alternate perspective using refutation, concession, or rebuttal. I can't say that word. I don't think that's how you say it, but close enough. All right, so that's why we've kind of gone over those papers many times, because that's been one of the ones they use a lot of. All right, this one we need to get better at, I think. And we haven't really, I need to start requiring more court cases. You're going to have several in this type, or this section of studying. So make sure that you know those. All right. And we're going to look at this question probably in class at some point and practice it. But these are examples of test questions that you might see. All right. So if you have any questions, please bring them to class, and I will see you later.